In the early 1900s, archaeologists opened a 6,000-year-old Egyptian tomb. Inside, they found something strange. Not gold, not jewels. Dried tubers carefully placed beside the body. They found the same tubers inside mummies' stomachs. It was their last meal, the food they chose to carry into the afterlife. For 6,000 years, this plant sustained entire civilizations. Today, agricultural departments classify it as one of the worst weeds on Earth. Chemical companies have made millions selling herbicides specifically designed to kill it. They publish technical bulletins calling it a menace. They've created an entire industry around its eradication. Universities dedicate research to destroying it. This plant produces more calories per acre than most cultivated crops. It survives droughts that kill everything else. It requires no fertilizer, no pesticides, no machinery. And that's precisely why they had to destroy it. This is the story of the superfood they turned into a weed. Let me take you back 16,000 years. At Wadi Kubaniya, north of Aswan, archaeologists found wild roots of this plant dating to 16,000 BCE. That's 8,000 years before agriculture as we know it even existed. These were wild harvests. Proof that humans were gathering this food during the last ice age. It was that important to survival. By 5000 BCE, this plant had become one of the most ancient cultivated foods in Egypt, ranking only behind emor, wheat, and barley. It wasn't supplemental. It was foundational to the entire civilization. In the tomb of Rekhmir, vizier to Pharaoh Thutmose III, wall paintings show peasants measuring and preparing these tubers, workers grinding them with long pestles, mixing them with honey, shaping the mixture into tall, pointed cones. These were sacred cakes, offerings to the god Amen, instituted by royal decree for every feast. The ancient Egyptians called them habit aziz. The Greeks knew them too. Theophrastus wrote about boiling them in beer. The Romans traded them across their empire. For thousands of years, they were everywhere. This is Chufa, scientifically known as cyperus, as culentus. The Spanish call it Chufa. Africans call it aya. In English, they're marketed as tiger nuts because of their striped skin. But they're not nuts at all. They're tubers. Underground energy storage organs like potatoes. Chufa is a member of the sedge family, the same family that gave us papyrus. It grows in marshes, in wet soils, in conditions where most food crops would rot and die. The plant has triangular stems and an underground network that can produce 75 tubers per plant. The tubers are small, about the size of a chickpea. They taste sweet and nutty, somewhere between almonds and coconut. Ancient Egyptians ate them raw, roasted over fires, boiled in beer, or ground with honey. They also used Chufa medicinally, the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts ever found. Prescribes Chufa mixtures for everything from mouth treatments to fumigations designed to sweeten the smell of houses. Beyond Egypt, Arabs carried Chufa to North Africa, Sicily, and Spain. In Valencia, it became the foundation of horchata de Chufa, a cold, sweet, milk-like beverage that's been produced there since the 13th century. Today, Valencia still cultivates over 1,000 tons of Chufa annually, specifically for horchata. 700 years of continuous tradition. But here's what's critical. Chufa wasn't just food, it was survival technology. The tubers can be dried and stored indefinitely. No refrigeration, no chemicals. They require no preservation method other than air. Once dried, they keep for years. You can rehydrate them by soaking in water for a few hours. They swell back to full size, ready to eat or to plant. That storage capacity meant ancient peoples could harvest Chufa in November, dry it through winter, and have food security through drought, famine, and siege. Now let's talk about what's inside these tubers, because this is where the suppression becomes criminal. Chufa contains up to 10% protein. That's comparable to many grains. But unlike most plant proteins, Chufa contains all essential amino acids. It's a complete protein source. The fat content is high, mostly healthy unsaturated fats like oleic acid. That's the same fat found in olive oil. Researchers have even proposed Chufa as a biodiesel crop because the oil yield is so high. The carbohydrate content is primarily resistant starch. Resistant starch feeds beneficial gut bacteria and doesn't spike blood sugar the way regular starch does. Chufa has twice the starch content of potatoes, but with a lower glycemic impact. You get sustained energy without the crash. The fiber content is nearly 4 times higher than standard fiber sources, promoting gut health in ways the Egyptians understood intuitively 3,000 years ago. It's also rich in minerals: calcium, magnesium, iron, and potassium. It's naturally gluten-free, dairy-free, and allergen-friendly. You can grind it into flour, blend it into milk, roast it for snacks, or eat it raw. So here's the question nobody in the agricultural industry wants to answer. If this tuber is nutritionally superior to most cultivated crops, if it has been sustaining civilizations for 16,000 years, if it requires no fertilizer and survives drought, why is it not a staple food? Why do we plant wheat and corn and soybeans instead? The answer is simple, brutal, and reveals everything about who controls what we eat. Chufa cannot be controlled, and the moment it escaped from Spain into commercial agriculture in other countries, they declared war on it. They branded it a weed, and they mobilized every weapon industrial agriculture had to eradicate it from existence. Yellow nutsedge, that's what they call the wild form of Chufa. It's now officially classified as one of the world's worst agricultural weeds. Not a minor problem, one of the absolute worst. Agricultural extension offices publish bulletins about it. Universities conduct research on killing it. Chemical companies engineer herbicides specifically to destroy it. The United States Department of Agriculture published Technical Bulletin number 1642, specifically about yellow nutsedge, calling it a menace in the Corn Belt. Think about that. The USDA dedicated federal resources to studying how to kill a plant that fed pharaohs. Why? Because yellow nutsedge spreads via underground tubers that regenerate even after the visible plant is killed. One plant can produce 75 tubers. Each tuber can survive in soil for years, waiting. It's nearly impossible to eradicate once established. That regenerative capacity, that resilience, that refusal to die is exactly what made it valuable for 6,000 years. Its survival perfected by evolution. But for industrial agriculture, which demands monocultures of patented seeds that must be purchased annually, Chufa is a nightmare. So they created an arsenal of chemicals to kill it. Glyphosate, halosulfuron, sulfentrazone, bentacin, an entire pharmacy of poisons engineered specifically to stop Chufa from growing. Research papers document the struggle. They admit that single applications often fail. They recommend sequential treatments year after year just to achieve 90% control, not elimination, just 90% control. And every time they spray, chemical companies make money. Every time farmers buy another round of herbicide, the industry profits. That's the real threat. Not that Chufa competes with crops, but that Chufa reveals how fragile industrial agriculture actually is. Our commodity crops require perfect conditions, constant inputs, chemical protection, massive infrastructure. Chufa requires none of that. It just grows and produces food abundantly without asking permission. In Spain, Chufa yields range from 3 to 6 tons per acre. Compare that to wheat, which averages 3 tons per acre with intense chemical management. Even on poor soils, wild Chufa yields hundreds of pounds of nutrient-dense food with zero inputs. And because the tubers store indefinitely, there's no waste, no refrigeration needed, no processing required. But here's what industrial agriculture cannot tolerate. You cannot patent Chufa. It's been cultivated for 6,000 years. It's public domain. You cannot sell herbicides for a crop that outcompetes weeds naturally. You cannot sell fertilizer for a crop that grows in poor soil. You cannot sell expensive equipment for a harvest that's traditionally done by hand. You cannot create dependency when farmers can save their own tubers and replant them indefinitely. The entire economic model of industrial agriculture requires crops that need constant inputs. Seeds you must buy every year. Fertilizers you must purchase. Pesticides you must apply. Equipment you must finance. Chufa represents everything that model opposes. It's free, it's resilient, it perpetuates itself without corporate intervention. And therefore, it had to be classified as a weed, demonized, and systematically poisoned. Extension bulletins warned that yellow nutsedge becomes invasive without acknowledging that invasive means successful. A plant that thrives without help is exactly what sustainable agriculture should look like. Instead, they teach farmers to see abundance as a problem requiring chemical solutions. And who benefits from this? Chemical companies selling herbicides, seed companies selling patented varieties, fertilizer manufacturers, equipment manufacturers. They cannot make money from Chufa, so Chufa had to disappear. They convinced everyone it's worthless, it's a pest, something to pour poison on. But knowledge doesn't die easily. In Valencia, Spain, Chufa cultivation continues. The Regulating Council protects the heritage of horchata. It represents 700 years of continuous tradition despite everything. In Africa, the Hausa people still cultivate Chufa as a food crop, trading it in markets across Nigeria and Mali. The knowledge survived colonialism. It survived the Green Revolution. In the last decade, Chufa has begun appearing in health food stores as tiger nuts. The paleo community discovered them. The gluten-free community discovered them. People looking for allergen-free foods discovered them. Researchers are studying Chufa for biodiesel because the oil content is so high, producing 174 gallons of oil per acre. Others are exploring Chufa flour as a gluten-free alternative to wheat. But notice what's not happening. No major agricultural university is promoting Chufa as a staple crop. No government agency is funding large-scale Chufa research for food security. They're still publishing bulletins on how to kill it. The infrastructure remains dedicated to suppression. The herbicide industry continues profiting from its destruction. The narrative remains unchanged. Chufa is a weed, not food. A pest, not a resource. A problem, not a solution. But the plant survives. Despite the herbicides, despite the propaganda, despite being classified as one of the worst weeds on earth, Chufa still grows wherever conditions allow. It still produces tubers, still offers the same nutrition that sustained Egyptian civilization for 6,000 years. This is a pattern we've seen before. Any crop that allows people to feed themselves without buying inputs gets suppressed. The tepary bean was called too wild to control and marginalized. Amaranth was banned by conquistadors. Perennial wheat varieties were replaced with annual ones that had to be purchased every year. Indigenous food systems worldwide have been systematically destroyed and replaced with crops that create dependency. It's not about feeding people, it's about controlling people. A population that can feed itself without purchasing seeds, fertilizer, and chemicals every year is a population that cannot be controlled through the food supply. That's why crops like Chufa are so dangerous to the current system. They prove that another way is possible. That abundance doesn't require corporate intervention. That resilience is natural, not something that needs to be engineered and sold. Today, we face converging crises. Climate change, soil depletion, water scarcity, the vulnerability of monoculture food systems. We need crops that can survive drought, that can grow in poor soils, that don't require constant chemical inputs, that provide complete nutrition, that store without refrigeration. Chufa checks every single box. It's been doing this for 16,000 years. But instead of researching how to incorporate it into modern food systems, we research how to kill it more effectively. Instead of celebrating a crop that could provide food security, we classify it as a menace. The insanity is staggering. We're destroying the solution while spending billions trying to engineer it from scratch. The knowledge survives because you can't kill truth forever. Every person who learns that the weed they've been poisoning is actually food from pharaohs' tombs becomes harder to control. Every farmer who discovers Chufa produces more nutrition per acre than wheat represents lost profit for chemical companies. Every garden where Chufa thrives without inputs is proof that the industrial narrative is a lie. They classified it as a weed because they couldn't patent it. They created herbicides to kill it because they couldn't commodify it. They convinced everyone it's worthless because its value undermines their entire economic model. But 16,000 years of human history tells a different story. This plant feeds people abundantly, sustainably, without asking permission. And that's why they want you to forget it exists. But you won't forget now, because now you know. The pharaohs knew. The agricultural departments definitely know. They know exactly how valuable it is. That's why they work so hard to suppress it. Chufa is still here, still growing in ditches and field edges, still producing those small, sweet tubers that sustain civilization, still waiting for people to remember what it really is. Not a weed, not a pest, not a menace, a superfood, a survival technology, a gift from 16,000 years of human partnership with plants. The next time you see a publication about controlling yellow nutsedge, remember this. They're not teaching you to control a weed, they're teaching you to destroy food. Free food, nutritious food, resilient food. Food that doesn't need their permission to grow. Food that doesn't generate profit for corporations. Food that proves we don't need industrial agriculture to survive. That's the real threat, not to crops, to control. Chufa represents agricultural independence, food sovereignty, the ability to feed yourself without buying anything from anyone. And in a world built on creating dependence, independence is the most dangerous thing of all. If this story changed how you see weeds versus food, share this video. More people need to know what's being hidden behind agricultural policy and chemical propaganda. Subscribe for more investigations into foods that were suppressed because they worked too well. The next deep dive is already underway. The future of food isn't in laboratories or chemical plants. It's in the weeds growing at the edge of the field. The plants they're spending millions to kill. The foods our ancestors knew were worth saving. Chufa survived 16,000 years. It survived empires rising and falling. It will survive this, too. The only question is, will we remember in time? The superfood they turned into a weed is still here, still offering its gifts, still waiting for us to see past the lies and recognize what we almost lost.